Anna, welcome back to the show. It's been so long.
It has.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Hey, first question, and I think it's a bit of a silly question, but if, like you hear about younger kids and stuff kind of testing negative quite quickly, if someone was to test negative on day 4, 5 or 6, are they therefore not infectious and could they be out of isolation?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that a middle ground, that the 7-day isolation or when you're testing negative, that could be the new rule?
Yeah, well, it was that comment that we sort of made quite a long time ago about testing to exit, right? Because that goes both ways. If you have a long infectious period, you're not out there infecting people. And if you're done and dusted quickly, you can get back to business. And that's why we always wanted to implement this. I get the reasons why they don't want that. And that's, well, I think the term is to avoid confusion. But if the term is test to exit, then I'm not sure why that is deemed confusing. Yeah. But, as in you could say, even the whole, it should be 7 days at least and then test to exit, it's still, that can be unnecessary. But I think one of the things that mandates do in a protection way, it's also protecting the individual that is sick, miserable, and at home, and their employer might be trying to make them go back to work, where A, they're sick and miserable, but B, they don't want the conscience of going and spreading this, and they're getting the pressure from their workplace to return to work. So I think in the context of mandating isolating when you're sick, that's where the wider protection comes in. So it's taking that onus off the individual, because honestly, no one should be going into any workplace coughing and spluttering, but we know that happens. Yeah. So we know at the very least we can control this infectious disease from escalating when it shouldn't. So, yeah.
Because it seems what they're saying, Anna, the gist I get from the opposition, and I know you don't necessarily want to talk politics, but just to talk about what they would plan, would they be government today, is to have no isolation. So it's not even the test negative to exit. It seems that the opposition is saying no isolation. Am I right in saying that the researchers, the medical experts, that COVID experts the world over are saying, in New Zealand the world over, thank the good Lord that the 7-day isolation have been kept in? Is there any pushback from that from within your community at all?
No, it's just sort of outright obvious way to go, because we have to remember that in this new environment we're in, we've lost all other protections. So anyone who is vulnerable is exposed already from people that don't care. So those people who are always going to be at risk will be at an extreme risk if there's no isolation. And so, world over, like as in the world, all different countries are doing different things. Yeah. But so too are their death rates and their hospitalizations and all the rest of it. So that's kind of what we balance up, right? And we also have to balance the fact that we're heading into our winter. I think one of the things that is worth noting is that our numbers, we did well through our summer period. Like we did, but we also know from history of every country that's gone through their summer and then into the winter, everything escalates at that point, because it's not just COVID. It's your flus, it's all the other winter illnesses that compound everything. So, everyone's coughing and spluttering, and then all those hospitalizations start to go up for compounding reasons. So if there's ever a time to sort of keep some form of protection in place, it's heading into the most vulnerable time. And I think that's, they do say they're going to review this decision in a few weeks. I think we'll start to see it going up. In every circle, we're hearing someone on their, on a reinfection or the first time infectees, that's still happening. And we absolutely know, access to testing is rubbish, that the willingness to test is rubbish, reporting, all of those things are going to be minimizing our true numbers out there. So, keeping something in place, even if it's to sort of protect, to have some form of protection for the vulnerable is so important.
Do we have any idea, they were calling them novids at one stage, people who hadn't caught COVID. Do we have any idea what the percentage of the population are still novids?
It's a great question that we were campaigning for our ministry to answer. and the can is kicked down the road over and over and over. I think it's getting kicked to never. So, just wait for that announcement. But essentially, that it's a great question, because this is what every country has tried to do, to get an indicator of how many people have got some form of immunity and so on and so forth, because it gives us a baseline. It also gives us a baseline if we did the best job in the world. So it really breaks me that we're not seeking to prove that we've got widespread hybrid immunity that's keeping our numbers lower than other nations, but we'll never know, because we have not done a seroprevalence to get an idea of how many New Zealanders have any form of immunity, and that's how you sort of do that indication essentially. But I mean, I think we're probably more likely to hear about people who have managed to dodge it and then they get a big kick from getting infected, because what really seems to be holding, and the data is showing this too, is that hybrid immunity is pretty damn strong. Or, like as in at the moment. I say at the moment, you can never hold your breath about, what variant may evolve, but hybrid immunity is giving good protection at a population level. But we will always hear about that person that suddenly succumbed, or the person who's on their multiple infections because they're just always getting, they're always susceptible. So that's sort of the situation I think we're facing, is a bit of a mix there. Because even when we've got lots of hybrid immunity, we'll be protecting the novids to a certain degree.
We've got a bunch of nerds in the chat right now. Swatty, geeky nerds. Threads, I've never had COVID. And Mr. Anderson, I'm a co-virgin.
Oh, that's a new
Jesus,
one.
that's worse.
David says, I'm a
confused.
novid. Vicky says, me too. Look at all these people, nerds. These guys will get beaten up at school, I bet you. DIY Guru, I'm a no COVID, no cry. So there's actually quite, if you're using our popular, I think it's just that we've got smart people watching. I think that's what it is, rather than maybe representative of the population.
I know heaps too. In fact, I did a head count of my family, and there's more novids than there is COVIDs. And I was like, oh, apart from, the little ones, there's no escaping it once it sort of sweeps through children. But I was like, oh, this is, as a wider family unit, we're probably quite unique that we're polarized in the novid versus COVID. And, I tend to wander around with, devices that bleed people and all the rest of it. So I tend to kind of make them prove it. And so, when we do have a look for antibodies and, check the novid, because novids are interesting. Yeah. Some turn up to be suspicious, like as in they weren't novids at all. They were asymptomatic at some point. And that's why it's really, really important that we should have done seroprevalence of the country, because even the novids, it can give that extra layer of comfort by going, woohoo, I nailed it and didn't feel it. Plus also, they know that they've got some form of hybrid immunity as well. So, it's just disappointing that, we haven't had a national survey to sort of gauge those numbers.
Can I ask you to explain, just in like 30 seconds or less, just so we update ourselves again, the idea of hybrid immunity? Can you just explain that super quick so people are really clear?
Yeah. So this is vaccination critical. And in fact, the data is showing, I believe, that vaccination first is your best protection, which is what, as a population, we did. So when you are exposed, you then get your immune system is then getting further training, and it's seeing the real McCoy. So it's not just seeing the spike protein, which is what our vaccination trains our immune system to detect. It's getting a much broader spectrum immune response, and those combined give you a much longer, longer duration and broader spectrum immune response. And I guess the key context here is that, we've had spin-offs of Omicron now for a year. And in that time, yes, they're all spin-offs, but that hybrid immunity is seeming to hold up. So the other key things about the immune system is we get obsessed about the antibody protection, because that's what we can detect easily, and we call that waning immunity and all the rest of it. But underneath we have our more complicated adaptive, our T cells and things that also kick in and do stuff. And then another part of the immune system, which is a bit more non-specific, and that's like a sprinkler system. And we can't measure who's got a good one and who's got a bad one. So there's so many players, which is why, we're forever studying this stuff, that make the immune response different in everyone. But certainly the papers showing the hybrid immunity versus just vaccination is very, very compelling. And I must preface that with a hybrid immunity is never a goal, because it's best to never get infected. And, keeping up with your vaccinations will help you not get infected. It's just that when you have been infected, your hybrid immunity is pretty good, at least in the current context, for a period of time, an unknown period of time.
Is everything in the country still Omicron? Like, I look at the charts just the other day and there's all the different acronyms and letters and Omicrons and not Deltas, but are they all Omicrons?
Well, they'll only become non-Omicron if we're sequencing and seeing that there's something different and decide to give it a new name, right? So,
but by Omicron, they kind of think that's the mother virus, and then had the babies. They're all kind of related, which means. So, for example, I was wondering. I had COVID in December. My 14-year-old got COVID on Friday. Well, we think she had it before that because she's basically over it already. And I was in her room with her an hour, giving her a cuddle before she went back to her mum's, breathing her air. And then she texted me when I was out saying, I've just tested positive. She had no symptoms. So I would have been inhaling her COVID air in her room an hour before. And I still say still, because Chewy challenged me last night, goes, not yet. But I still haven't tested positive. And I wonder if part of it's that hybrid immunity you're talking about, but the idea that because it's probably still an Omicron, that makes it even more protected. It's part of the same. I think about plants, you have the mother plant, and then you can take cuttings from it and have baby plants. It's that sort of thing. It's the versions of that mother one.
Yeah, and our immune system is now like more broadly trained. And so we always knew that vaccination and boosting was always good. So essentially, when you got COVID in December, your immune system was boosted. And we know that even a vaccine boost is good for a good 3 months at least. But when you get a viral boost, that's looking like it extends the duration. But as I say, you always take that with a grain of salt, because I could say, oh, look, it extends it for a year based on the paper I looked at that was based on a year ago. You know what I mean? So everything's always constantly moving. But but the point is that our hybrid immunity does last that much longer. And that's why we didn't see, when we were watching really closely over summer, when XBB 1 point, all the different variants that were causing massive peaks in the US, hospitalizations everywhere, we expected the same here. And the reason that we probably didn't see that was because we'd just been through our waves and high vaccination rates. And our population, I think, should be one to study, where we had mostly vaccinated before we're getting mostly infected. Right. There's very few nations that are in that order, and maybe that was the key. And, the politicians, it's bizarre that no one wants to prove this, because it could prove that the lockdowns were the best thing to do. There's so many things you could do with that information, because I don't think it's going to there's nothing negative that's going to come of it. I think we're in a position that we could show that sequence of events is best for our population-based health. But only time will tell. Because we're at a point in time and we don't know. It depends what we do from here, and whether how many more exposures and if this thing mutates any further, or whether we just got Omicron soups now.
I've only got one more question, Chewy. Do you want to jump in with anything as well, Bear?
I guess talking about the comparison with other countries, right? This is the thing that always comes back. It just makes me want to bang my head against the desk. Luxon and Seymour also sort of went, but other countries, like, why are we comparing ourselves to people who had worse responses?
I know that's a funny one, isn't it? But they killed way more people. Let's do that. That's what it sounds like, right? So
but you're exactly right. Like, our circumstances are not the same as any other country out there. By all accounts, we made mostly right choices all the way through, and there's got to be a benefit at really examining the nuts and bolts of what that has given us now.
Exactly, because it's honestly surprised me on a population basis that as those variants, the immune escape variants, because we see what that means in scientific literature in a laboratory setting, and then you see what happens in the real world. And what we were seeing in the real world in the UK and the US was peaks of hospitalizations, and we didn't see that happen here. We've been seeing bubbling away little, we haven't peaked with the new variants coming through. So I think that one of those escapees is our main variant now, and yes, it will still be infecting people, but we're not getting a massive peak, because when that variant is circulating in a group of people who have had COVID, even if there's a bunch of novids as well, it's just that the percents getting infected are much lower. Like, you're not going to see 100% hit rate, I guess, is what we're what I'm sort of inferring here. You will get the odd person picked off. So yeah, it is frustrating to compare to other countries when we're not other countries. Yeah. And I think the thing that we can't lose sight of is the catastrophic events that happen in the hospital, basically in the winters of other countries. So we're mindful of that. Again, we don't sort of mirror that could happen here, but you've got to be careful of those scenarios, because it's our hospital, it's our healthcare workers that bear it, right? With your RSVs, your flus, and basically just anything else that's, people are getting exposed to now, because, it's a winter where all the floodgates are open. Yeah.
I still only have one more question. I kind of have two. The first one's, where's the cat? But the second one, and more importantly, is, are we in a bit of a surge at the moment? Because I know definitely 5 people right now who have COVID. Like, I know 5 people, like not like friends of friends, but like a person directly related to me. I think I might know 6, potentially 7. It feels to me, from my little anecdotal evidence, that there's that it's starting up again. Do you see that at all in the data? The cat heard me. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. He's coming. He's incoming.
Oh, good.
Well, we'll see. It does seem a bit like that. And is it that we're heading into the cooler months, and it's always going to be a combination of waning and the winter. Because you're right. Like, I've started to hear more and more cases. The workplaces, and people are like, oh, so and so's finally got it, or they've got it. A couple of people on their second round. So yeah, it's sounding like it's starting to happen. And it's, as I say, it's tough to know if that's a combination of waning immunity and the winter months coming. Don't know. Now's a good time, if you think you're bulletproof, to get boosted. If you're a novid, 100% get boosted. Like, novids are sitting ducks, because that bivalent is giving you that broader spectrum immunity against the Omicron variants. And again, anecdotally, when we were here in the middle of the waves last year, we had the giant first one, and then during that second winter one, when it was sort of picking off people who had not had COVID back then, anecdotally, in groups of people who had had COVID versus recently boosted versus sitting ducks, the recently boosted did not get infected. That the 3 times vaccinated sitting ducks got infected, and the others didn't get it reinfected. So those are the sorts of scenarios that could potentially start playing out as well. That if you're a novid and you've just had your boosters, but your last one was a year ago, get boosted. Yeah. Whereas you also may, in the same vein, sort of think, well, my infection was in December, like yourself. Will you push out your time period to 6 months because you've got a good innings right now that we can't measure? We don't know how long that lasts, but it's that how long is boosters are going to be accessible, and when's the peak time that you want to protect yourself, I guess is.
I think also the rules at the moment, it has to be 6 months after a booster or having COVID. So maybe what I'll do is get online and go and have a look, because I was the start of December. Maybe I'll go have a look for the start of, what would that be? December, January, February, March, April, May would be 5, June would be 6. So maybe I'll go and try and book myself in for the second week of June or something, and just book it now so I get a spot and see if I can make it happen. Maybe.
Yeah. So it's good to lock that in once once you're different, and especially winter. We know it escalates. So yeah.
All right. Hey, look, it's amazing to have you on again. For people who don't know, who may be joining us for a first or second time, Anna has been sort of a co-host on this from time to time because she's always on, and she's on a lot and on for a long time. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really keen to obviously stay in touch with us. We know it's still out there. As the Prime Minister said, it seems like some people are treating it like it's not. But we just want to give people the information. You can lead a horse to water, Anna. You can't make them drink, but if we give them the information, that's all I guess that we can do from this side.
That's right. And it's all about caring for everyone as well, the vulnerable communities. And that's what this is all about. It's giving people the tools, as much tools as possible. And now we've got barely any. So, you know, having some tools will at least protect the remaining few that need protecting.